The afternoon sun streamed through the enormous glass windows of luxury motors, making the imported cars shine like jewels on display. Mr. Francisco adjusted the collar of his worn shirt, feeling the weight of the salespeople's gazes as he crossed the automatic door. His worn shoes made a discreet sound against the polished marble floor, contrasting with the clinking of the Italian shoes of the staff. "Can I help?" The salesperson's voice came off more as an accusation than an offer of assistance. Ricardo, as indicated by his golden badge, could hardly hide his disdain as he assessed the roughly 70-year-old man before him. "Yes, please, I'd like to see that model." Francisco pointed to a gleaming black Mercedes-Benz in the center of the showroom. Ricardo let out a contained laugh and exchanged glances with two other salespeople who were approaching. "Sir, this car costs over 2 million reais. Perhaps I could show you something more suitable." "The price is not a problem," Francisco replied calmly, his calloused hands lightly touching the flawless body of the vehicle. "Fernando, come see this," Ricardo called to another salesperson, now laughing openly. "Do you have any idea about the cost of maintenance, the insurance? Look, there's a used car dealership nearby that's the same guy who was picking up cans at the fair last week." Fernando interrupted, provoking laughter from the other salespeople who now formed a small audience. The store manager, Marcelo, approached in his impeccable suit. "Is there a problem here?" "None," Ricardo replied, still laughing. "This gentleman wants to buy the most expensive Mercedes in the store. He must have won the lottery, right?" Francisco remained silent, his eyes scanning every detail of the car as the mean comments continued. "Look at that outfit," a saleswoman whispered to her colleague. "He must be pulling a prank or is lost." Marcelo cleared his throat, adopting a more condescending tone. "Sir, we need to serve clients who can genuinely afford to—" "I understand perfectly," Francisco interrupted him, his calm voice contrasting with the hostile environment. He slowly walked towards the exit, stopping only for a moment to look back. "You know, sometimes time is the best teacher, and tomorrow will be an interesting day." The group of salespeople erupted in laughter as the automatic doors closed behind Francisco. What they didn't notice was the small smile forming at the corner of his lips as he tucked a card with the name of the dealership's owner into his pocket. In the parking lot, a black Rolls-Royce awaited him, discreetly positioned out of sight from the store staff. Before getting into the car, Francisco looked back at the dealership one more time, his eyes reflecting not anger, but a silent determination that would make that arrogant group understand the true value of humility. The workshop Hope had the gay, characteristic smell of oil and metal that Francisco loved so much. It was 1975, and the 23-year-old mechanic already showed a special talent for understanding machines as if they were extensions of his own body. The place was small, squeezed between two buildings in downtown São Paulo, but for Francisco, it was a palace of possibilities. "Boss, there's something different about this engine," commented João, his only employee at the time, watching Francisco work on a Volkswagen Beetle. "The noise changed after you touched it." Francisco smiled, his hands black with grease, holding a part he had modified himself. "It's not the noise that changed, João. It's the efficiency. This part I developed reduces fuel consumption by 30%. The old radio played Roberto Carlos in the background, while Francisco leaned over his drawing board every night after the workshop closed. Technical drawings, calculations, and prototypes filled every inch of his small table. The yellowish light from the fluorescent lamp was his only companion during those intense work nights. "You need to rest," said his wife Maria, bringing hot coffee in a worn thermos. "You're going to make yourself sick this way." But Francisco knew he was close to something big. Every failure brought him closer to success. Every broken part was a lesson learned. His hands, once smooth, now told stories through scars and calluses, medals of honor for his dedication. On a particularly hot afternoon, while testing his latest modification on an engine, a man in a suit entered the workshop. The contrast between his immaculate attire and the grease-filled environment caught everyone's attention. "I'm looking for Mr. Francisco," he said, adjusting his gold-framed glasses. My name is Robert Williams, representing Continental Motors, from the United States. Francisco wiped his hands on a stained cloth and approached with curiosity. The man handed over a business card and continued, "It has come to our attention that you've developed something interesting." Before Francisco could respond, the workshop phone rang. João answered and, with wide eyes, called out, "Boss, it's from Germany. They say it's urgent." Francisco looked at the card in his hands, then at Robert, and finally at his small workshop. At that moment he didn't know it, but his life was about to change forever. The phone continued to ring, echoing like a harbinger of the future that awaited him. "Excuse me," he said to Robert, walking towards the phone. "I think today will be a more interesting day than I imagined." The heels of Francisco's Italian shoes echoed through the silent corridors of the Maxud Plaza Hotel. It was 2024, and discreet meetings at the luxurious top-floor restaurant had become his routine over the past decades. Executives from automakers worldwide queued to renew licensing contracts for their patent, which had revolutionized the automotive industry. "Mr. Francisco, the representatives from BMW have arrived," whispered Rafael, his personal assistant for 15 years while adjusting his boss's tie. "And Mercedes has confirmed they'll be here after lunch." Francisco nodded, his tired eyes hiding a glimmer of satisfaction. The piece he developed in that small workshop had become the heart of a revolution in engine efficiency. But unlike many inventors, he chose to remain in the shadows, cherishing his privacy as his most precious asset. "The coffee is just how you like it," Rafael added, opening the door to the meeting room. "And the report on luxury motors that you requested is already on your desk." The German executives immediately stood upon seeing him enter. Their impeccable suits and calculated smiles couldn't conceal their nervousness. The license renewal depended on this meeting. "Gentlemen," Francisco greeted, taking his seat at the head of the table, "let's get straight to the point." "What do you have to show me?" Heinrich Müller, CEO of the engine division, began his presentation. Graphs and numbers danced on the screen, showing the impact of Francisco's technology over the past years. But his thoughts were distant, focused on the file about luxury motors waiting for him. "As you can see, efficiency has increased by 42% since the last update," Müller explained, his voice revealing a slight accent. "The numbers are impressive." "Numbers," Francisco murmured, interrupting the presentation. "You know, Heinrich, when I developed this technology, I wasn't thinking about numbers. I was thinking about people." The room fell silent. Francisco stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of São Paulo. "Do you know why I never wanted to show up? Why I preferred to stay behind the scenes?" He turned to the executives. "Because true power doesn't need to flaunt itself. It manifests at the right moment." Rafael quietly entered the room, handing an envelope to Francisco. It was the confirmation. Luxury Motors was for sale, suffocated by debt and mismanagement. "The meeting is adjourned," Francisco announced, surprising everyone. "Rafael will finalize the renewal details. I have other matters to attend to." As the executives exited, confused but relieved about the guaranteed renewal, Francisco opened the envelope. The pages revealed the entire structure of the dealership: employees, debts, assets. His eyes lingered on the names of the salespeople who had humiliated him. "Rafael," he called, his calm voice hiding the determination in his eyes. "Schedule a meeting with our lawyers, and that list of dealerships we've acquired in recent years? Bring it to me." Sitting in his chair, Francisco opened an old folder. Inside, dozens of documents displayed his silent network of dealerships, all operating under different names, all profitable, all transformed by his humanized management. "Are you really going to buy it?" Rafael asked, recognizing that look from his boss. "Well," Francisco smiled, taking the card from the owner of Luxury Motors that he had saved the previous day. "You know, Rafael, over all these years, I've learned that money is a powerful tool. But do you know what is even more powerful? The ability to teach a lesson." His phone rang. It was his lawyer, confirming that the purchase proposal was ready. Francisco looked once again at the city through the window, thinking about how fate had interesting ways of operating. "Prepare the documents," he said on the phone. Tomorrow will be a different day at Luxury Motors, and this time we will be the ones teaching the lesson. As he gathered the documents, Francisco picked up an old yellowed photo. In it, his small workshop, Hope, appeared sunny, with him and João smiling in front. How much time had passed? How many lives had changed? How many lessons had been learned? Rafael, he called again. Schedule a visit to the dealership for tomorrow as well. I want to see how their service is doing in person. The assistant smiled, knowing well his boss's plans. Francisco was not a man of revenge. He was a man of transformation. And once again he would use his power not to destroy, but to teach. Night fell over São Paulo as Francisco finally left the hotel. In his Rolls-Royce, he looked at the luxury Motors building in the distance, its lights still on, its salespeople still arrogant, all unaware that fate was about to teach them a valuable lesson in humility and respect. Morning light had barely emerged when Francisco entered his private office on the 20th floor of a discreet building in downtown São Paulo. On the antique mahogany desk, a stack of documents awaited his review. The acquisition of Luxury Motors needed to be meticulous, like all the others he had made over the years. The lawyers have arrived, sir, Rafael announced, serving the breakfast that Francisco always took there between one document and another. And they brought the information you requested about the employees. Francisco picked up the first folder. Inside were photos and detailed histories of each salesperson at the dealership. His eyes lingered on the image of Ricardo, the seller who led the mockery the previous day. 15 years of experience, but his sales had been declining in recent months. Problems with customers, complaints about his arrogant attitude. Dr. Mendes, Francisco greeted his lead lawyer who had just entered. What did you find out about their financial situation? It's worse than we imagined, Mendes replied, opening his folder. The dealership is sinking in debt. The current owner, Roberto Campos, made terrible investment decisions. They lost 30% of revenue in the last quarter. Francisco smiled discreetly, grabbing another folder. This one contained information about his other dealerships, all operating under different names. Novo Horizonte Vehicles, Prime Motors, Estrela Automóveis. Each had been transformed under his management, becoming examples of excellence in service and respect for the customer. And what about the administrative staff? Francisco asked, flipping through more documents. We found some interesting surprises, Rafael said, handing over another report. There's good people there, sir. People who tried to change the company's culture but were silenced, especially in the maintenance team. Francisco nodded, remembering his own history. He could recognize talent and dedication even when others didn't see it. Prepare the offer, he ordered the lawyers. But I want a special clause in the contract. The ownership transition must be immediate upon signing, no adaptation period. The lawyers exchanged surprised glances. Typically, transitions of this scale took weeks, sometimes months. Mr. Francisco, Dr. Mendes intervened, that's quite unusual. Mr. Campos might resist these terms. He's not in a position to resist anything, Francisco replied, his voice calm yet firm. The debts are due, suppliers are pressing. He will accept. The following hours were devoted to refining every detail of the contract. Francisco was well familiar with that process. It was his 12th acquisition in the sector. Each dealership he had purchased had a similar story. Problematic management, unmotivated employees, dissatisfied customers. And each had transformed into a success story under his leadership. Rafael, Francisco called in the late afternoon, schedule a meeting with Roberto Campos for tomorrow morning and prepare that material about our network of dealerships. I want him to understand exactly who he's negotiating with. As the lawyers left, Francisco took an old photo from his wallet. In it, the facade of his first workshop, Esperança, shone under the 70s sun. How many turns fate had taken since then. One more thing, he said, putting the photo away. Prepare a list of the maintenance staff. I want to meet them personally after the purchase is completed. The sun was already setting when Francisco finally left the office. In the elevator, he encountered a young delivery person who greeted him respectfully. Francisco smiled, remembering how appearances could be deceiving, something the salespeople at Luxury Motors would soon learn. In his Rolls-Royce on the way home, Francisco made one last call. "Is everything ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Rafael replied. Roberto Campos confirmed the meeting for 8 a.m. "And that salesman, Ricardo, will be on duty tomorrow at the dealership." "Great," Francisco replied, a small smile appearing on his lips. "Tomorrow will be a day of great lessons." The car glided silently through the streets of São Paulo as Francisco mentally reviewed every detail of his plan. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about transformation, about teaching the value of respect and humility, and sometimes the best lessons come in the most unexpected ways. The morning had barely started when Francisco walked through the doors of Luxury Motors. The same marble floor, the same gleaming cars. But today, something was different. Today, he was the owner. The meeting with Roberto Campos had been quick and decisive. In less than an hour, all the documents were signed. "Please call all the employees to the showroom," his calm voice echoed through the space, while Rafael organized some folders beside him. The salespeople, who still didn't know about the change, exchanged confused glances. Ricardo, the same one, who had humiliated him the day before, approached with his business smile. "Can I assist you, sir? I see you are looking for—" "You already helped me enough yesterday," Francisco interrupted him, his eyes fixed on the salesman. Ricardo's smile froze, and a shadow of recognition began to appear on his face. The employees gathered. Nervous whispers filled the air. Marcelo, the manager, tried to maintain his authoritative stance, but his restless hands betrayed him. "Good morning, everyone," Francisco began, his firm voice resonating through the showroom. "Some of you already know me from yesterday. Others will get to know me now. My name is Francisco Oliveira, and from today I am the new owner of Luxury Motors." The silence that followed was deafening. Ricardo turned pale. His shaky legs forced him to lean against a nearby pillar. Fernando, the other salesman who had participated in the mockery, dropped his coffee cup, staining the immaculate floor. "But this is impossible," Marcelo whispered, taking a step forward. Mr. Campos signed the transfer exactly 47 minutes ago," Rafael interrupted, showing the documents. "The transition is immediate." Francisco walked slowly through the showroom, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. "You know, for years I built a silent empire in the automotive industry. 12 dealerships, all transformed under my management. But yesterday, something interesting happened here." He stopped in front of Ricardo, who was now visibly trembling. "You taught me a valuable lesson about how not to treat people, about how arrogance can blind someone to what truly matters." "Sir, I didn't know," stammered Ricardo. "Please forgive me, Apologies are easy when we are cornered," Francisco replied. "But transformation, that requires much more." Turning to all the employees, Francisco continued, "From today onwards, a lot will change. First, our customer service policy. Every customer who enters through that door deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or social status." Marcelo stepped forward, nervously adjusting his tie. "Mr. Francisco, I can assure you that our salespeople are trained to humiliate people like me," Francisco interrupted, his tone still calm but laden with authority. "To judge by appearance. To laugh at those who don't fit your ideal customer standard." The manager stepped back, speechless. Francisco then gestured to Rafael, who began handing out envelopes to each employee. "Inside these envelopes you will find two things: a letter detailing our new policies, and for some, a termination letter. Those who receive the second option have until the end of the day to clear their desks." Ricardo opened his envelope with trembling hands, his eyes filling with tears as he saw the dismissal letter. Fernando and Marcelo had the same shock. "But," continued Francisco, "I also believe in second chances. That's why I kept people whom others would consider unlikely." He called Jose, the janitor who had worked at the dealership for 15 years. "Jose will be our new operations manager. He knows every inch of this store and, more importantly, understands the value of respect." Looks of astonishment multiplied as Jose, still in his cleaning uniform, received a new badge from Francisco. "True. Greatness is not in the position we hold or the clothes we wear," Francisco declared, looking at every face present. "It's in the character we show, the respect we offer, and the humility with which we treat others." As some employees celebrated their continuations and others gathered their belongings, Francisco called Rafael. "Prepare the job postings. I want people who understand that a dealership doesn't just sell cars, it sells respect, dignity, and dreams." The day ended differently than it had begun. The marble floor remained the same, cars still shone under the lights, but something fundamental had changed at Luxury Motors. And as Francisco watched the sun set through the large showroom windows, he knew this was only the beginning of a great transformation. Sometimes, he murmured to himself, the best lessons come from the most unexpected places. In just 3 months, Luxury Motors had transformed. What was once an environment of arrogance and discrimination now pulsed with a different energy. Francisco had implemented changes that went far beyond merely swapping employees. "Good morning, Mr. Francisco," greeted Jose, now impeccable in his tailored suit, but maintaining his usual humility. "The new apprentices have arrived for the training program." Francisco observed the group of young people who timidly entered the showroom. There were 15 boys and girls, all from underprivileged communities, selected for the new training program in automotive mechanics and sales. "Welcome to your new home," Francisco greeted them, noticing the amazed looks they cast at the luxurious cars. "Here you will learn much more than mechanics or sales techniques. You will learn about dignity." The program had been his first big change. He transformed part of the dealership into a training center, equipped with the most modern tools and simulators. The instructors were experienced professionals, including some that Francisco had brought from his other dealerships. "Sir," called one of the young learners hesitantly, "is it true that you started as a mechanic?" Francisco smiled, leading the group to a wall where a framed photo of his old workshop, Hope, hung. "I started exactly like you," he replied, "with many dreams and little recognition, but I learned that true success is not in having power, but in using it to transform lives." At that moment, an elderly gentleman entered the dealership, dressed in simple clothes and carrying a cane. Immediately, Clara, one of the new salespeople, approached with a genuine smile. "Good morning, how can I help you?" Francisco watched in satisfaction as Clara offered coffee to the customer, listened to his needs attentively, and treated him with the same respect she would give a businessman in an Italian suit. "Do you see?" he said to the learners. "That is what makes us different. Here we don't just sell cars, we sell dignity, respect, and opportunities." In the afternoon, during a meeting with his management team, Francisco received a surprise. Ricardo, the former salesperson who had humiliated him, requested an audience. "Let him in," authorized Francisco. Ricardo entered, visibly different from the arrogant man 3 months ago. His clothes were simpler, his demeanor more humble. "Mr. Francisco," he began, his voice choked, "I came to not only apologize but to ask for an opportunity. These months unemployed have taught me a lot. I'm working as a used car salesman in a small shop, and for the first time I understood the value of each customer." Francisco watched him in silence, remembering his own life lessons. "The junior salesperson position is still open," he finally replied. "You will start from scratch as an apprentice. Do you accept?" Ricardo's eyes filled with tears. "I accept, sir. I promise you won't regret it." At the end of the day, Francisco gathered all employees and learners in the showroom. The setting sun streamed through the windows, making the cars shine with a special light. "Today we complete 3 months of transformation," he began, "but our journey is just beginning. Each person who enters through that door carries dreams, and our role is to treat them with the respect they deserve." He paused, looking at each face present. "Starting tomorrow, Luxury Motors will cease to exist. In its place, Esperanza Motors will be born, a name that embodies the essence of what truly matters." The employees applauded, many with tears in their eyes. Francisco raised his hand, asking for silence. "And there's more. Each employee will receive a small share in the company, because everyone here is part of this transformation." The celebration that followed was genuine and moving. Francisco observed everything with a serene smile, thinking about how life takes extraordinary turns. Later, alone in his office, he picked up the photo of his old workshop again. Next to it, he placed a recent picture of the team from now Esperanza Motors, a diverse family united by respect and the desire to make a difference. "See, Maria," he murmured to the photo of his late wife on the table. "Sometimes we need to lose everything to gain something much bigger." The sun had completely set when Francisco left the dealership that night. In the parking lot, his Rolls-Royce awaited, but he decided to walk a bit. He passed by the storefront, admiring the reflection of the new sign that would be installed. The next day, Esperanza Motors, where dreams are honored. A young apprentice ran to him. "Mr. Francisco, you forgot your folder." "Thank you," he smiled, taking the folder. "You know, son, never forget. True power is not in humiliating others, but in uplifting them. That is the greatest lesson life has taught me." And so Francisco continued on his way, knowing he had transformed not just a dealership, but had created a legacy of respect and dignity that would last far beyond his time. Because sometimes the greatest victories are not in defeating others, but in helping them become better.